there are two kinds of dynamics that come into play when we're working with sexual violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse within the family. And I'm going to kind of put them into two different categories. There's what I talk about as narcissistic abuse, and then there's what I talk about as sadistic abuse. And the dynamics of those two kinds of abuse are very different. And for us as clinicians, it's important for us to understand the distinction. So with narcissistic abuse, it's as if, and now I'm talking about a parent or an adult to a child, it's as if the child doesn't exist. So the child is just a means to an end for the adult of, wanting to satisfy whatever urge they're acting out with the child, and the child doesn't really exist. This kind of abuser never is concerned about the child's reaction, except when it starts to threaten them in some ways, and they may threaten the child that, something terrible will happen to their family or to their brother, or, I mean, there's the way that the perpetrators create these kinds of threats is all different kinds of scenarios. But mostly it's just as if the child doesn't exist. And that's a very important piece. And that the child's feelings are, of course, irrelevant to this narcissistic abuser. They're caught up in their own narcissistic bubble, and they're doing what they want to do or feel the impulse to do without any regard for the child. Now, it's very different when there's sadistic abuse, and there can be sadistic abuse with all kinds of abuse. There can be sadistic physical abuse, sadistic emotional abuse, and sadistic sexual abuse. But here there's a difference in terms of the perpetrator's intention, because the more that the child responds or reacts or is frightened or is hurt, the more the sadistic abuser likes it. Now, I know this is touchy territory to talk about. It's kind of, it's not an easy thing. But the way we intervene with those two different scenarios is very significant, because with narcissistic abuse, then the traditional tools that we use as therapists, which is, accurate mirroring, supporting, letting them share their feelings, making their feelings and in NARM we talk specifically their whole inner world, being open to hearing, how it is for them. That's incredibly healing for somebody who's been on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse. And we're often paying attention to, the person's, now let's say they're an adult coming to see you. We're tracking how they react and what's going on emotionally, what's going on in their body. That's generally what we do in NARM. That's what we do generally in psychotherapy and in different forms. And that doesn't work in the same way, at least at the beginning of the process, when somebody who's been sexually abused, because their feelings were used against them. And you may have had clients who you can see or get a sense of that they're uncomfortable with how closely you're paying attention to them and their responses, and they're wanting distance, and they're wanting to, if your chairs are face to face, that feels too confrontational to them. They're wanting to turn away. This is often, I can't say always, of course, but this is often some kind of reflection, not necessarily of sexual abuse, but of this kind of sadistic abuse, where of some form or another, where the abuser was actually tracking the child's feelings in order and basically it brings them pleasure to bring the child pain or fear or whatever the dynamic is.